United Nations Special Envoy is due to land in Burma within the next hour for crisis talks in the wake of the ruthless crackdown on pro-democracy protests. Ibrahim Gambari says he hopes to have, in his words, a very fruitful meeting with leaders of the military regime. Latest reports indicate the streets of Rangoon are quiet but extremely tense tonight, with the army tightening its grip on the city following 3 days of violence. Just how many people have been killed by the army is far from clear, but the official figure of 13 appears to be a gross underestimate.
Rangoon is in lockdown. Barbed wire and barricades now block all main roads. Key pagodas and monasteries have been sealed off. The internet has been cut and people with cameras and mobile phones are being arrested. Burma's military regime is doing all it can to tighten its grip. This was the scene 24 hours ago. The protesters still defiant. "We want democracy," they shout. "May those who beat monks be struck down by lightning." The protesters taunt the troops. It's a potentially deadly game of cat and mouse. The demonstrators try to run, but the troops hunt them down.
We've seen a lot of people arrested. We saw 50 or more scooped up in one go. They are predominantly young men, civilians.
The military's strong-arm tactics appear to have silenced many demonstrators. The protests are now smaller, and again there are few monks on the streets. But there are growing concerns that the crackdown has taken a heavy toll.
The Burmese official estimate of 10 dead is likely to be a real exaggeration. I think the numbers are going to be substantially higher than that. They could be multiples of 10 higher.
Images like these may fuel the protesters' anger, and now the government is said to be sending in vigilantes to fight the demonstrators, but they can't understand why.
We are not fighting against the soldier. I think we need to know that. And we are fighting against authoritarian rule. They have self-appointed dictators. We cannot allow this.
Burmese say after 45 years of military rule, the protesters are not about to give up. This opposition leader, exiled in France, fears a showdown is inevitable.
If they are very angry, what can it lead to? We don't know, And then the army itself, the generals itself, in their usual mentality, they won't give up.
Others say the killing and beating of monks shows what lengths the regime will go to.
Now they shoot to the people and they shoot to the monk. What the hell is this? I don't know, what should I do? I can't even sleep last night. I'm really worried about my friends, my brother, it's all of my relative.
Burmese state television has hit back at the international media, accusing it of stoking the violence. First they were called liars, now this.
Beware of BBC and VOA saboteurs.
But the regime has a history of human rights abuses. 3,000 people were killed when the army crushed a student uprising in 1988. And now there appears to be new evidence. The image at the top shows a small rebel village. The one below shows military camps taking over the area. A scientific research group says the satellite images show evidence of a scorched earth policy used against villagers. Ashley Neame, World News Australia.
Andrew Kirkwood is the director of the Save the Children Fund in Burma, and I spoke to him a few minutes ago about the mood on the streets in Rangoon.
Certainly compared to, I think, the last week, where tensions have been incredibly high, yes, today, the streets are eerily quiet today. Fewer cars and fewer people on the streets.
So are you expecting that perhaps something will happen, or do you think it's simmered down a bit?
There have been quite a lot of rumours about continued protests and demonstrations today, but it's very difficult to distinguish between rumour and fact at this stage.
Is there much anticipation surrounding the imminent arrival of United Nations Special Envoy Ibrahim Gambari?
The people I spoken to about it today, of course they're based in Rangoon, where communications are better, but they certainly know of his visit, and there is quite a lot of expectation, yes.
There appears to be some concern for areas outside of Rangoon that may have been targeted by the military. Have you heard anything along those lines?
We haven't. We have, Save the Children has 35 offices around the country, and we have been in contact with them yesterday and many of them this morning. And there were some peaceful demonstrations that went off in a number of places yesterday, but there was no significant confrontations that we know about.
Okay, so how is your organisation then coping in terms of providing support and aid?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the humanitarian situation in this country has been bad for children for quite a long time. This is, and the current crisis doesn't really change things for the majority of people. But we continue to operate our 35 offices around the country, providing health care, education, and child protection. Obviously, we're monitoring the situation very carefully, so we don't put our staff in unreasonable danger. But at the moment, we're still able to offer, implement all of our programs.
Well, CNN correspondent John Vos is monitoring the situation from Thailand. And John, it sounds like things have quietened down in Rangoon. So where to now, do you think, for the protest movement?
Well, certainly this is normally around the time of day when we've been getting word of demonstrators taking to the streets. But what we're now hearing is there is this overwhelming security presence on the streets. It seems that the military government is determined to restore calm and take control ahead of the arrival of the special UN envoy sometime today. What is likely to happen is what we've been seeing is an ever-diminishing number of protesters taking to the streets, and it does appear that the army and the government, the military government, is getting the upper hand here, at least at the moment, Janice.
These protests began as demonstrations against fuel rises, but it seems now, of course, there's a bigger push for democracy and regime change. But is the military likely to buckle now that the international spotlight is on them?
Well, it's unlikely that any pressure on this military regime, this dictatorship, it will have any impact unless countries like China, Thailand and India are involved in that international pressure as well. What we're seeing is the United States taking the high road, imposing sanctions on the military dictatorship. But countries like China are still doing business with Myanmar, still pumping in hard currency into that military dictatorship, and that's propping up that government. So until China and India and other countries that continue to go into Myanmar or Burma, continue to exploit that country's vast natural resources, until they come on board with those sanctions, then it seems that that military dictatorship will continue to survive.
What do you think is the significance of the UN envoy's Ibrahim Gambari's visit?
Well, I mean, the fact that they're letting him in at this very difficult time is significant and would probably represent or give an indication that the military dictatorship in Myanmar is feeling the pressure, possibly from countries like China, which has been urging restraint on all sides. But it has to be said that this is really, in some parts, being overblown as a major achievement. The UN Special Envoy was heading there anyway in October. He was there last November. So this is not quite the break that some parties have been making out that it actually is.
John Vos, thanks for your time.